Hey everyone, I thought I might record the final table of this tournament I was lucky enough to ship last night, partially for my own review of strategy and possibly for your interest and perusal. So it's about 87 hands, so I'm not exactly sure how long this should run. I guess we'll find out. Alright, so this was a pretty funny way to start a final table, coming in, as you can see, as the overwhelming chip leader. So I just 3-bet small. Obviously, the guy raising under the gun, who was a good player with 10 big blinds, is never folding, so I'm just trying to induce from people behind, and strangely enough, we both woke up with aces, and I'm sure, well, I was disappointed, and I'm sure he was disappointed too, to find out that we were almost guaranteed a chop. There was one player behind who time banked for a while, and I'm guessing had a pretty decent holding. Might have hit that board pretty well, so maybe I'm glad he folded. So I just wanted to point out the payouts for this final table. I'm just doing this off memory because the tournament lobby from Stars is already gone. The payouts were something like 500, and then maybe like 600, then a little under 1,000, then 7th place was maybe 12 or 13, 6th was like 15 or 16, 5th was a little under 2,000, 4th was a little over 2,000, 3rd was 3,000, 2nd 4,000, and 1st place was 55, or I think 5,600 actually. So right there you actually saw me make a pretty tight fold pre-flop with ace-7 suited. As the chip leader, and especially at a final table, typically I'm opening that pretty much 100% of the time, but there were a couple of factors that went into my folding it. One, you had like 3 really short stacks in the blind areas who are just looking to get it in, which I actually don't mind getting in it against their range so much. I'm obviously priced in when they reshove. But there were also 2 really aggressive players behind me who had like perfect reshove stacks and were just looking to get it in really wide, but not so wide that I could call off 40% of my stack with ace-7 suited, especially when I could just coast to the top 3 and maybe even the top 2, just kind of playing my cards straight up. So I was actually playing this final table, at least at the start, pretty tightly. I thought I should have a tight image to most of these thinking players, but I kept getting action on my big hands, and I think that was a function maybe of them judging that, or deducing that I'm, a regular player, either through looking at my bet sizing and my style, and or checking my OPR. And people tend to just kind of assume that if someone's a regular, that they're like really aggro, and especially at a final table opening really wide, which I think is something you can take advantage of by actually playing a little tighter at final tables. And generally I'm on the nittier side anyway, so it's just more in my comfort zone. Here you saw an interesting hand. Khatri opened, and he was opening really wide. He was running like 24-20 for a while. So I think the guy's shove with 3s there is actually pretty good. As we saw, Khatri folded. He was just really unfortunate to run into the short stack with kings, and really that's kind of a hand that, well, I mean, you could find a fold with 3s, but I think it was actually pretty good. He had the right stack size to reshove there, and I think Khatri's got to fold the vast majority of his range, and a good portion of the range that he even does call with is ace-king, ace-queen, maybe ace-jack, probably ace-jack, maybe ace-10, and you're flipping, you're actually ahead of that anyway. So here I opened with a king-deuce from under the gun, just trying to take advantage of my image, actually. Of course, it did not work out because I got flatted, which looks pretty strong, and then a reshove over the top, and I was surprised that the flatter didn't call that squeeze, because he hadn't been flatting at all, and I thought that was a pretty strong move. Like, I was like not even going to be comfortable on king high flops there. So I was pretty surprised that he was lighter than I expected. So this was really bad news because Crawford was easily the second best player at this table, if I could be so brash as to call myself the best, which I think I was. And he was the one guy I really didn't want to see accumulating chips, and here he just kind of got donated to, so now he's the third stack. But luckily he decides on the very next hand to ship it into my aces. And as we're going to see here in a second, he was 3-bet shoving with jacks, which is super standard. Just really unfortunate on his part. I mean, obviously if he has aces and reshoves there and I have jacks, like, I'm cold calling anyway, so it's, I mean, kind of one of those meta coin flip situations, if you will, but at a final table I'll not complain about being on the right side of a cooler, especially the way I've been running prior to the last 3 or 4 days. I really, I would not apologize. I did get dealt a lot of big hands on this final table, which was kind of funny because actually at the beginning of this tournament I went about 100 hands, and I know this because I was actually one-tabling this for pretty much the whole time. I went the first 100 hands without getting dealt a hand better than King Jack, which kind of sounds like Bush League complaining, but I've been running bad, so I'm looking for anything to complain about. And I quickly punched up the odds on that, and the odds of not getting dealt a hand better than King Jack for 100 hands were something like 200 to 1. So I was pretty tilted at the start of this tournament. It's pretty funny that I ended up kind of cruising to first place here. So not a ton of interesting hands so far. And honestly, there's not a lot of great post-flop action until we get down to maybe the final 4 here. Here's an interesting spot with King Jack where I could reship it, but this guy, Boo Boo, I guess, was really calling off was kind of playing like just short of maniacal, and I was in pretty bad shape against his calling range, obviously, and I think he probably like makes some hero calls with like ace-9, ace-8. So I chose to flat and play, getting like 4.5 to 1, maybe 25 to 30 big blinds deep with King Jack, and just kind of play it straightforward. I didn't hit anything, and luckily I didn't hit anything because he had ace king. So if a king came, I could have been in some trouble there. I think shove, flat, and fold are all viable options in that spot. I just decided to play it a little Helmuthian, if you will, which for all the flack he takes, I think can be correct in certain situations. So obviously I've been pretty quiet other than just getting dealt aces for the hell of it so far. But that's part of the luxury of being a big stack in these ICM situations, is that you can kind of just let the 20 big blind stacks run into each other and just kind of cruise to the top 3 and wait to get a little deeper. And I was really confident in my post-flop advantage against pretty much all of these players. The one guy who busted was the one person of whom I was a little afraid, but I was pretty confident that I could outplay these guys post-flop. Here I raise ace-10, under the gun 6-handed, really standard, take it down, no big deal. What else did I want to talk about? Yeah, I basically ran like God in the second half of this tournament. I had about 40k with, I don't know, 50 players to go, and got it in a 3-way all-in with ace-king against ace-queen and jacks, and managed to pick a king on the river, which was pretty swell. And from there, I don't think I ever was out of the chip lead. Here I'm very excited because it looks like I could be pretty wide on the button with ace-queen. I get just flat called, which I'm not thrilled about, either from his vantage point or from mine. I check behind because I think it's a classic, like, if I bet, I'm going to pause it here for a second, just because there's actually some thinking in this hand. I check behind on the flop because I don't think I fold out any better hands. And I don't really expect to get called by much worse outside of maybe some hero calls from like ace-10 type hands, but those kind of hands probably reshove pre-flop, so I wasn't especially, I wasn't really thinking that I was up against that. Now the turn I check behind because it's obviously a hand that just smashes my range for checking behind that flop. And I think if I bet, I fold out pretty much his entire range again, except for hands that are beating me, like, I don't know, weird two pairs or sets, although sets he probably leads the turn. He probably leads the turn when most of the range beats me. I'm basically, most importantly, trying to induce a bluff on the river here, because I don't expect him to have a lot, and there aren't a lot of cards that scare me on the river. There were no draws out there except for, I mean, 8-9, which again, I'd be surprised if you were flatting 8-9 there, although it's possible, I guess, so I'm going to hit play here. And he does bet, and I just snap him off, and yeah, sure enough, he had king high, so I actually played that pretty optimally as it turned out. So then I run into queens here, and there's another interesting hand where I'm going to pause it to kind of go through some of my thinking here. So right away, the guy who we just caught a bluff against flats from the small blind with he's got 14 big blinds effective. He's putting in 15% of his stack pre-flop out of position, which you know, just pretty much stunned me. I kind of was afraid now because I couldn't imagine a good player, and he was a winning player. I couldn't imagine a good player flatting here with anything other than aces or kings, because it just makes no sense. There's absolutely no way that he can outplay me post-flop this shallow. It doesn't even matter what my holding is. It's just virtually impossible. Like, I thought maybe he was going for a stop and go, which I thought had become outdated as of 2006, but I suppose it was possible. Alright, so let's see the flop here. Flop comes king 8-5, which is a pretty good flop for my hand. The only hand I'm really afraid of is aces. I think king queen, because again, my expectation right now is that this is a fairly competent player. His flat wouldn't tell you that. I think it's possible that he's a little tilted from our having caught his bluff the last hand, but the only king he can really have is maybe king queen, ace king reshoves, maybe I guess king jack, but you know, unless he has like a set of kings or aces, I'm not that scared right now. So considering it's a pretty draw heavy board, I'm just planning to bet fold. So I bet like half the pot. Yep. And he just calls, which is kind of bad because I can't. It's a really weird spot. I can't imagine what hand that I'm ahead of is calling unless he's just trying to induce a second barrel with a hand like ace-8, which is possible, but I feel like he'd rather protect against draws with ace-8, and again, I kind of would expect him to reshove pre-flop with ace-8. So now I kind of feel like I'm beat. It's more of a gut feeling than like a strategic certainty. So I just decided that basically the decision I have to make here is not so much, it is whether to bet the flop, bet the turn, but the question of whether to shove the turn here is a secondary function of whether I am going to call his bet on the river, because I can't imagine there's any river outside of maybe an ace where he's not shoving, because either he missed and he's trying to take the pot, or he's got the best hand and he wants to get value. I really don't think he has any bluff catchers in his range outside of maybe ace-8 on the river. So I have to decide right now, do I plan to call the river? And the answer to that question is yes. So what that means is that I would rather bet the turn and get it in right here to protect against draws, spades, maybe a weird straight draw or something, because I'm calling his better hands on the river anyway. So if I get it in here on the turn against his better hands, oh well, he was shipping those on the river, now it's going to call. So I'd rather just make him pay to draw. Alright, so yeah, I do end up putting it in here. Hold on, sorry, it's freaking out a little. I'm just gonna replay it from that point. Shit. Alright, hold on 1 second. Alright, sorry about that. The software is a little glitchy, I have been noticing, so we're just going to take it from the top of this hand, which should go through pretty quickly. So, bet the turn, like we saw, he calls, and then like I said, I'm going to... I bet the flop, and now I'm going to shove the turn. He calls, and he... yeah, he's got king fucking 5, which just blew me away. Like, I couldn't in a million years have put him on that hand, and it obviously adversely affects all the strategy discussion of how I handle the flop and turn. The fact that he could have king 5 means that he could have virtually any suited and perhaps unsuited king there. It's obviously terrible for him to be flatting that hand with 14 big blinds out of position. I mean, it's just awful, and I imagine he was planning on bluffing most flops that he didn't hit, so it was pretty unlucky for me that he hit one of his 3 outs. But, you know, if he's willing to put himself in that adverse a situation, there's really not much I can do. When he hits his king 5 suited with 14 big blinds from the small blind, like, God bless. Like, I'm not good enough to beat that level of thinking, I suppose. Alright, so I still have a pretty healthy chip lead, so I wasn't especially panicking yet. Just chalked it up to bad luck. Now here, he's got an M of 13, which means that he has 13 times the total amount in the pot there when I shove from the small blind. And basically, I'm just trying to screw with him from an ICM standpoint, which means that, you know, he has incentive to fold a lot of his stronger hands because he's one of the bigger stacks, and it's likely that he can just make a lot more money by not doing anything stupid. So it's almost impossible for him to call with anything but like the top 5% of his range there, and I'm just willing. I mean, if he has the top 5% of his range there, then when I'm raising from the small blind, he's 3-betting and we're getting it in anyway. So I'd rather avoid him 3-betting hands like Jack Queen and then him actually getting a flip out of it. I'd rather just kind of push him around a bit and use the ICM to my advantage. Alright, so here we've got an open with... oh, really? Right, so here we've got an open from a guy with 10 big blinds, and he doesn't shove, he just min-raises. So I think King Queen is actually a really easy fold there, because I don't understand how he's ever doing that with anything but the absolute nuts. And I don't remember what he had, but he ended up bet folding, so I guess he probably had something like Ace-King or Ace-Queen. I don't think he's ever light there. So here I open with Ace-8 from the cutoff, which is pretty standard. Short stack, flat calls, a lot of post-flop poker with 5 big blinds effective or whatever. And he actually pulled the old stop and go, and we had him dominated from the start, and that did not change on the flop or on the turn or river there. So that was a nice little infusion there. I could have opened with King 2. I just felt that I had 2 really, really aggressive players behind, and they were reshoving quite light. Here we had 7-6, try to screw with Ace-7's ICM. It did not work out. Well, it did work out because he sucked out. It did not work out in terms of the pre-flop equity. But this Katre guy was also quite aggressive, so he wasn't someone, even though I felt I was a better player, I didn't especially like him having chips. Now everyone that's left, apart from H2O, was pretty aggressive. Boo Boo. I feel a little silly for pronouncing that. And Katre were both quite aggressive players here. So, and here they actually get it in. which is, that looks pretty standard to me, with like 25 big blinds effective or something like that. Ace-8 suited is a good reshove. The button's opening really wide. It was unfortunate for Khatri that the button happened to have 10s there. I think that pretty much played itself. Here I'm just priced in to call with any 2 cards, because he's shoving any 2 cards, and it's just 12k to win a pot of 36, so I have the right odds pretty much no matter what. It's a little annoying because he ends up doubling up, and now Ken, with one more double up, becomes a factor in the tournament again. It's good for me in a sense because I can kind of ICM exploit the other 2 stacks, except for the fact that I don't really have many more chips than they do anymore. So, given how aggressive they are, that wasn't necessarily going to be a huge advantage for me. And here, he gets it in with 4-3 and hits a dream flop. I'm not sure about a shove there. I think I'd rather just wait for the next hand on the big blind. I mean, I guess he's got some minor fold equity, but as it turned out, a guy's calling with 9-10, so he didn't really have any fold equity at all, but he didn't know that, to be fair. And now he gets a 3-bet shove and take it, so all of a sudden he's got 100k again, and it's kind of an interesting dynamic at this point. Yeah, so as you can see, I've been playing pretty snug so far. I'm going to start opening it up, I believe, four-handed, because now my chip advantage is not as significant, which might seem slightly counterintuitive. So this is a standard bet fold spot, and I've got a pretty tight image, so I think he might even fold some better hands, like some stronger aces there. So I took it down. Here I'm just praying for someone to wake up with something, with aces obviously, and someone did. And he's got 6s, which is really, really standard, just kind of unlucky for him, because I'm opening on the button quite wide, pretty much any ace, most kings, suited connectors, any pair, etc. Yeah, so I held, which was a theme of this tournament, which is always nice. Here I 3-bet small. I was 3-bet folding. I didn't really want to just flat call and try to play ace-deuce out of position without initiative. That's really difficult to do. So I was just going to 3-bet fold. I figured his 4-bet range pretty much had ace-deuce crushed. You know, you don't always want to turn strong hands into bluffs, but out of position, I couldn't call a 4-bet, but I didn't think I could play it profitably, just kind of guessing what he had from the button, so it was just easier. So now we've got a really nice chip edge again. I pretty much start opening my entire range at this point, because the difference between third and second is $1,000, which I would like to think the other 2 guys are considering, especially the guy with 250k, because the other fellow is so close to busting. So I'm trying to take advantage of that. It didn't really work because he's just hyper aggressive. He kind of ends up running the table here. I mean, controlling the table, not winning every hand, although he did win most hands for a while here. Here I open Jack-10 again, really standard. In retrospect, I think my open size from the small blind out of position there was kind of small. It was like 2.2 or something. I think I probably should have made it more like 2.3 or 2.4. But bet sizing is a whole separate discussion. Unlike most regular players, I don't just min raise. I don't really like that. I prefer to go to 2.1 or so, even when you're really shallow, partially for psychological reasons. I think you get more respect if you don't min raise, and partially for math reasons. So here, Jack-10 and Ace-Queen get it in, blind versus blind. This is incredibly standard, and the big blind finds a queen on the river there, which is annoying, because I would have, you know, it's nice to have the kind of ICM factor, but I'd rather just get it heads up, because I was pretty confident in my post-flop game against the bigger stack of the 2. Here I open Queen-8, again, really standard, hit a great flop. I bet the flop, he just calls. So now I want to talk about this turn for a second. It's not a great turn card, but it's not a terrible turn card either. Really, the only hands we're worried about are 9-7 and Queen 10, and maybe like a float from Jack 9. But I think we're still pretty far ahead of his range. The fact that he just calls, I don't know. This is pretty close. I could see, and maybe even in retrospect, prefer an argument for just continuing. One, because it lets my line look kind of bluffy. I could be two-barreling with any ace, any king, just a lot of random hands, a lot of pair plus straight draws. I could be doing all sorts of stuff, two-barreling, and that looks kind of bluffy. And also, it's now a scary board because so many four-card straights and trips and all sorts of weird things, and things that counterfeit my two-pair. All sorts of things can happen on the river, so I want to protect against that. But even though I didn't think this guy was that good, he was trying some advanced plays over the course of the last couple of tables, so I thought his flop was a float a lot of the time, and that he was going to call the flop to bluff the turn after I checked to him. So I decided to play into that because I thought he had more floats than he did value hands. As it turned out, it didn't work because he just checks behind on the turn, so that means he's got something he wants to just pot control with, probably something like Ace-6, which now beats us. I don't know, Queen Jack, King 8, hands like that. It's a pretty thin value. No, it's not that thin. It's a little bit thin to bet on the river, but I'm so annoyed about not having gotten value on the turn, because I was obviously planning to check shove the turn, that I tried to squeeze some value out on the river, but I think he just folds. And yeah, that's exactly what he does. Alright, so this is a close one. I think I'm probably about flipping with his range with King 9. But I think because I have the ICM edge on the two of them right now, it's not really a spot where I want to call off. And I might be slightly behind. Like, I don't mind taking a flip there, but I feel like I can find a better spot. Here I open with Queen 5. Okay, so here I just open with Queen 5, and I choose not to c-bet the flop, because I've now done this either 2 or 3 times with him, and I've c-bet all 3 flops, I think, once as sort of a bluff and twice for value. So it's getting to a point where even I feel like he should be, just as part of the dynamic, raising me with almost any 2 cards, especially because it's so hard for my hand to have hit this board. If I didn't have a monster beforehand, or like exactly Ace-7, King-7, 8-7, it's just really difficult for me to represent a hand, so I'm basically giving up. And when he checks behind, I think maybe he has a 3. He could be slow playing a 7 and trying to induce. Alright, so I hit my 5 on the turn, and now I could check call, but if I check call, I'm probably going to have to check call again on the river, which I can't do with this kind of hand, unless I really think he's checking the flop to then bluff twice, which just doesn't really make sense from his standpoint. He should have just bet the flop if he didn't have anything, and I think he probably would have. So I kind of just decide to bet fold for value, get value from a 3, and fold if he raises, and he raises small, which to me looks like he's trying to induce, and I think that's actually a really easy fold. I think it's extremely likely that he had a 7 there. I could be wrong, but I think that's the pretty standard play given my line on the flop. Here I just get a walk. So now he opens small, which had me a little nervous because he wasn't doing that. He was just auto-shoving with 20 big blinds or less. And here he's got 15. So for him to be opening, I'm kind of wary of it. But Ace-10 is just such a strong hand, 3-handed, that if he's got a better hand, you just chalk it up to a cooler. So I decided to 3-bet small, so I could fold to a 4-bet shove. I think I would fold to a 4-bet shove, at least giving myself that option. I don't think it's good to just shove over his open with a pretty big stack behind. Here, Queen 6 is far enough behind his range. That's an easy fold. The King 9 was a lot closer. I kind of want to stove that. Here I open with 10-9, and he 3-bets. Now, this is kind of a tricky spot. He 3-bets small. He gave me basically 3.5 to 1 to call. So I could 4-bet fold, but 10-9 suited is a pretty strong hand, and the stack to pot ratio is still 4 to 1 going to the flop. So there's a little, not a lot, but there's a little room for some poker to be played. Like I can play 2 streets. Like I could call a flop and semi-bluff the turn if I get the right kind of board texture. In retrospect, I don't know, 4-bet folding seems bad because I'm getting good direct odds. I have a very playable hand, and I think he's liable to 5-bet pretty wide because we've got this pretty aggressive dynamic going now. So I choose just to call. It's debatable. I could 4-bet shove and kind of make his life an ICM nightmare. Oh, it's doing this again, hold on. Make his life an ICM nightmare, but it's just, it also makes my life a nightmare if he's woken up with, I don't know, ace-king or an overpair or whatever. I mean, ace-king, actually, we're not in that bad shape against. Here I could bet fold as kind of a thin semi-bluff, but I just choose to check fold. I could have check raised. I think it just wasn't necessary to take that kind of a risk. I wasn't thrilled with the board. The Jack of Spades is a nice card, but the rest was not as great, so I just kind of let it go. It's close, though. I could see an argument being made for check raise bluffing, or even lead bluffing, which actually might be better because then I have some outs. Here he, this was an interesting one. Here he again opens small, and obviously he knows that I know that last time he was light here because I 3-bet and he folded. Now he's got even fewer. He's only got 13 big blinds at the start of the hand, and he's still just opening. He's not shoving, which to me just screams strength because 1, we have the fact that he was weak last time, and 2, he's just so short. Like he should be shoving like almost all of his range except for like big hands. So I actually like thought ace-8 was a really, well, not an easy fold because I think honestly most tournament players are 3-betting over that. Not to like put myself on a pedestal, but I think the standard is probably to get it in there. But that felt really, really strong to me, so I thought ace-8 was a pretty instinctive fold. It was see the big blind shoves, and I believe he, hold on. Sorry, I gotta hit the replayer real fast. Okay. I fold big blind shoves, and he gets snapped off here by sure enough, 2 queens. Yeah. So, you know, I read the strength there, the big blind didn't, and that saved me a boatload of chips. Or actually, it saved me from accidentally winning the tournament, because an ace would have hit, but obviously, we can't be results-oriented. The 5 reshove, I mean, obviously, I think you should have read strength, but I can't blame him. I think most players reshove. Now here, I'm opening Jack 6 because now they have very similar stacks, which makes it a situation where they should both be playing tighter against me because they each want the other to bust before they go nuts. But these two guys just were so aggressive that it was difficult to exploit those situations. I think on their part, aggressive to a fault, honestly. I think ICM is extremely valid, and I think a lot of players underrate it. The value of just increasing your winnings by place. So again, I'm just opening any button trying to exploit that. Maybe I shouldn't have. So here, this is an interesting board. I thought about betting and checking behind. I can do a lot of things. I'm capable of checking behind here with monsters, like sets, 2 pairs. Not with overpairs, probably. Definitely not with overpairs. But that range is pretty balanced, so I like to balance that with a delayed continuation bet with air or weak draws on occasion. And this actually isn't that weak a draw, but I think that would have been a valid play. But I also just kind of, my hand isn't that strong, and the board isn't too likely to have hit him. I think he's probably calling with hands like Queen 10 and King 9, things like that, that probably didn't connect with this board unless he hit a flush draw. I was nervous about betting because I've got, 8 outs to the nuts, or virtual nuts, and, I don't want to be pushed off my hand, because I don't think he's often check calling, except for a hand like A7. I think he's more likely to check raise, and maybe even with a hand like A7 to protect against draws. But still, I think it's better to bluff, because my hand doesn't have that much value necessarily. So I bet half pot, which was pretty much my standard on every street. And he just calls. Now I have him on like a 7, and I hit not quite my gym card, but a great card. And I try to bluff it because obviously my hand is still vulnerable. Not bluff it, bet it rather, because my hand's still vulnerable, and unfortunately he got away. I don't think he folds a 7 there, so I think he might have been trying to hero with ace high and then just gave up. So here I flat with a very playable hand. Again, I could have 3-bet, but I didn't know if I wanted to shove necessarily, and 3-bet folding seemed like a disaster. So getting like almost, I guess it's something like 4-1, like Jack 10 suited is, if I can't play that profitably, getting 4-1, even out of position, I should just unregister pre-flop, because it's hard to screw it up. And obviously I get my dream flop. I think anything but check raising is terrible. And I like check raising because I get to represent a naked club draw, which gets called by a lot of weaker pairs. The fact that I have the 10 is really disguised there. So I think if he had any pair, he's probably calling. Here it's a really standard ICM shove with the 3s. It's hard for him to call with anything but monsters, and I'm flipping with ace, king, ace, queen, etc. Anyway. So obviously I've hit a couple of flops here, and like I said, I ran pretty freaking well over the course of this final table, but given how I've been running previously, I am not going to apologize for that. So, I haven't had too many difficult decisions, honestly. There were a couple. I guess the hand with the queens was pretty difficult, but beyond that, I think this was a pretty easy final table to play. Here we get 2 hands getting it. I think it's pretty standard. Excuse me. So, if you guys find this video useful, here I have 9, so this is just wonderful. I'm hoping everyone reshoves. And the little stack gets it in with ace-6, which is really quite standard. But I did win a couple of other tournaments in the past 2 months. One for like 25 grand and one for about 15. The one for 25 grand especially was a really, really interesting final table from a strategic perspective. So if you guys find this at all useful, I'll definitely do a video for that one as well. This one was just more fresh in my mind, so I thought it would be a good place to start. So here I gave him a couple of walks in a row. He's pretty much raising 100% of his range, and I was planning on 3-betting pretty light here soon to just kind of let him know what's up. But I don't really want to do that with 8-4. And I gave him 2 walks in the button, which looked really weak, and it's kind of like, this is part of the metagame that I don't mind playing heads up. Interestingly, I like to think I'm a really strong heads-up tournament player. I do not think I'm a strong heads-up cash game player, which is strange because I don't think the skill sets are all that different. I guess I'm just more comfortable heads-up in tournaments because usually you're not more than 40 to 50 big blinds deep, and I'm pretty good at kind of massaging those situations. I don't think I'm as comfortable playing 100 to 200 or more big blinds deep in cash game situations. With that said, I really, I don't like giving him a walk with 2 of my buttons in a row, but it's kind of making me look weaker than I actually am. And I like to let them think that they can run over me and then choose spots. As it turns out, the cards just kind of fell into my lap here coming up, so there wasn't as much, here we go, strategy. So I opened Queen 9, really standard. He 3-bets small. Or actually, honestly, wow, that's bigger than I remember it being. I'm going to flat here in position, which, seeing that he made it 2.5 times, is now kind of questionable. I almost definitely, in retrospect, prefer a 4-bet. I don't think flatting in position with Queen 9 is all that bad, though. Still getting better than 2-1 in position with a hand that honestly is not very far behind his range, because I think he's 3-betting probably close to like 30 to 40% of his range here, because he was just trying to establish just a dominant dynamic. And I think part of my flat call here is just to establish that he's not going to take everything down pre-flop. You know, I'm gonna bluff certain boards. I'm gonna pot control when I hit a pair. And it's part of the metagame. Like, if he ends up betting and just taking this pot on the flop, his stack hasn't grown so much that I'm concerned yet. It's close, but I end up flatting. And obviously I get a dream flop, so he checks, which is actually a great sign. I think his check is stronger than a bet would have been, because I think he's pretty much always checking the check raise all in, because it's just, if he didn't hit a piece of this board, he's going to continue after 3-betting from out of position pretty much 100% of the time. He's not the kind of player, judging on by this final table, that ever is going to give up. So the fact that he checked means he wants me to try to posture at it, which I do. And, well, he thinks I do. Actually, I have top 2. I bet half the pot I'm doing. He check shoves, I auto call. And he had King 9, so we obviously got extremely fortunate here to hit pretty much a dream flop. And I don't blame his play at all, because I'm probably betting that flop once it's checked to me close to 100% of the time. It's hard for me to think of hands that I don't bet that flop with. Maybe some ace highs that don't have a spade, to try to pot control, call a turn with an ace, thinking I might have the best hand, but excuse me. Yeah, I just yeah, his check is so strong there. So I'm pretty confident once he checked that we were getting it in, and I was going to be something like, you know, close to having him draw dead. He had 3 outs, so I was 90%. So yeah, as you saw, this final table was for the most part extremely straightforward. There were a couple interesting spots. I think the ace-8 lay down from the small blind actually turned out to be pretty crucial in a spot where I think most players are getting it in. So I think there were a couple of non-standard plays, and this Queen 9 was probably a little unusual, but I think it was mostly a function of the dynamic and my just trying to get my get a foothold without having to 4-bet fold with Queen 9, which is a pretty disastrous play. So that'll about do it. If you've stayed with me this long, I appreciate your audience, and hope that you either learn something or will be able to help me learn something, because maybe I just play terrible. Alright.